Keisha Miller. I am the teen librarian. I'm the teen librarian and volunteer coordinator here at South Orange Public Library, and it is so wonderful to see you all as we continue our celebration for Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And we are so very glad to welcome three local artists, poets, are also artists, here this evening. And so before we begin, for this Evensong, a reading of poetry and prose as we bring together Poetry Month and Asian American Pacific Islander Month, I'll introduce our poets. First up, in classic librarian order, because it's alphabetical. Theresa Burns. Theresa Burns' debut full-length collection of poems, Design, is just released from Terrapin Books. She's also the author of the chapbook, Two Train Town. Her poetry reviews and nonfiction have appeared in the New York Times, Prairie Schooner, New Ohio Review, JAMA American Magazine, the Cortland Review, Plum, Swim, and elsewhere. A Pushcart Prize nominee, she's been awarded honor mentions for the New Jersey Poets Prize and the Allen Ginsberg Poetry Prize. Burns is the founder in 2019 of the community-based reading series Watershed Literary Events and teaches writing in and around New York. When we do this final editing of the video, we'll make sure to have the link to where you can find more information about our poets. Moving on to Jung Hae Chae, who is a Korean-American writer. Her poetry and prose have appeared in AGNI, Crazyhorse, Calyx Journal, Guernica, Ploughshares, and elsewhere. Most recently, her essays have been selected for inclusion in the 2022 Best American Essays and the 2019 Pushcart Prize collection. She won the 2021 Crazyhorse Prize in Nonfiction and the 2019 Emerging Writers Contest in Nonfiction from Ploughshares. Her work has been supported by scholarships and fellowships from New Jersey State Council of the Arts, Idlewild Arts Foundation, Monson Arts, Sewanee Writers Conference, Squaw Valley Writers Conference, and others. Currently, she is at work on a memoir that explores the matrilineal Han in the Korean diaspora. Last but not least, we have Rosen Chang. She's the author of the full-length poetry collection, The Curator's Notes, also by Terrapin Books. Her poems appear or are forthcoming in Michigan Quarterly Review, the Journal, Diode, Verse Daily, Poet Lore, Valparaiso Poetry Review, Cortland Review, and other literary journals and anthologies. She is the recipient of the Oregon Poetry Association's Fall 2018 Poet's Choice Award, an honorable mention for Spoon River Poetry Review's 2019 Editor's Prize, and a 2020 and 2021 Pushcart nominee. She has an MFA from the program for writers at Warren Wilson College, and we are so glad to have each of you join us this evening. So, without further ado, I'm going to
Thanks so much, Keisha. I always have to go first, because my name is Burns, and, all my life I had to go first. But that's fine. I can actually take this mask off. Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much for organizing all of this, Keisha. The room looks great. We were kind of planning on having an outdoor event, but you've really brought the outdoors indoors here, and it's a beautiful space. So thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So yeah, I have, it took 20 years, but I actually have a book published, a book of poetry. And yes, and my pressmate, actually, Rosen Chang, is here tonight as well. We're published by Terrapin Books. It's a really terrific publisher. So I'm just going to start, because the rain, I guess, did, force us inside. I wanted to start with a poem called Shade Lovers, and it begins with some rain. Shade Lovers. 5 straight days of rain, and the enormous hosta we moved out back fills out, blue as a lung, threatens to inhale the ghost fern's hellebore, like something before history, when insects grew as big as gulls, and the world choked on its own oxygen. Here, under the canopy, among the creepers and water suckers, we thrive, while out in front, the full sun singes. How the annuals there exhaust me. Passers-by, all their needs and thirsts. Stay and rest with me here. Be mourning, partial, as I am to you, who knows to turn your gaze to the side and let me breathe. This first book, this first section of the book, there are 5 sections to the book design, and it has a variety of poems that are called Design, sort of scattered throughout the book. But I'm going to read the first poem in the book. So it opens the first section. Someone threw down a wildflower garden in an empty lot in Newark. And now, instead of staring at the weeds and broken bottles from the train platform, we're taking in a scene from a Monet. Asters, cosmos, little yellow fists of something, all random and confetti. I'm half expecting a lady in a high-waist dress and bonnet to appear on the diagonal, stroll through its splendor, pausing with her parasol so we can selfie with her. Maybe she'll hop aboard the light rail to the Amtrak station, get off in DC, step back into the painting she escaped. Who was the genius who thought of this? What meadow-in-a-can Samaritan got sick of passing the 4-acre eyesore on the walk to work, shook pity into blossom? To whom do I write my thank you? Mayor, surveyor, county clerk, church lady? Who marched down to City Hall, begged anyone who would listen? It was Mother's Day recently, and I thought I would read a poem that is probably one of the oldest poems in the book. The original thesis that I had, because I went to an NFA program in poetry, by the end you're going to produce a thesis, and that's supposed to be the seed of your book that you're supposed to publish within a reasonable amount of time, not 20 years. But this is one, as it turned out, this is one of only 2 poems in this book that are from that original thesis. I don't know what yours turned out to be. But yeah, two whole poems out of about 50. School night. She entered the room the way a moose comes onto a road. Startling, foreign. It took a minute to get her bearings. Things hung off her like a Christmas tree in February. Laundry she brought up from the basement. Sunglasses she almost stepped on. A school bag someone left by the back door and might still need at 11 o'clock at night. If there were 4 or 5 of us lit by the TV, she moved slowly, Wade shutting it off in the middle of a Hitchcock movie, or the lone sex scene she inevitably walked in on. Or she might stand in front of it in disgust, as if she'd never seen this invention. God, give me patience. But if there were 1 or 2 of us reading, it could be the funny papers or a dirty novel we found at the local pool. She suddenly became delicate and moved around us quietly as a doe, maybe smoothing our hair as she passed, as if this were the only thing that mattered, as if the house wasn't falling apart around us. And the only reason for her existence was to ask us in her sweetest mother voice, do you have enough light? It's so great to be here reading at an event with Robin and Jung. Jung is someone I met years ago in the city when we were both working on our poetry manuscripts. We were in a workshop with Cornelius Eady. And I was amazed years later to find that she had moved to South Orange. Robin, I've only met in the past 5 or 7 years, but I've had enormous respect for her poetry. So I'm so glad they're both with me tonight. Let's see. I'm going to read Hair Story. This is kind of a pandemic poem, or what I thought was a post-pandemic poem. Hair Story. The decades of office hair, cropped and bobbed, quarterly highlights. Interview hair, designed to move up. Then the long unraveling. Kids home from college, half-hour shower hair. To hide acne, big ears. Hair to be snaked from the drain, detangled, forgotten to brush. Who cares? We don't go anywhere. Acres of hair, bushels, a hectare. Hair in the way, French twisted, scrunchied, tied back with socks, teeth gripped, braided in thirds. Sit in a kitchen, hair gaining on us, losing loft. Sit in a kitchen chair while my husband L'Oreal's my hair. Hair in my food, in dreams going back to high school. Hair to my ass. Neil Young swarmed in Central Park. Crazyhorse hair. Broken guitar string. First love with his thick mane out the car window. Softest hair, cut short at his wake. Hold back my hair, friend, while I lose my guts. Hair I twirl like a girl again. I'm going to read one of the short design poems. There's 4 of these in the book. They're short. Design. I don't believe in all the same thing, but in repetition, yes, surely yes. A shaky faith in the rule of 3, Trinity. A flowering shrub here and here and there. Then, against the glowback of the familiar, the odd answer appears. A single daffodil or hyacinth nub, middle of midweek. And in between, I don't believe, evergreen.
More. More design.
I'm going to read a poem because my son is here. He's just back from college. And this is another old poem, not quite as old as School Night, but when he was a pretty small kid.
I know this one.
And don't tell me it embarrasses you. Like so much that we do. And it's called, and it's called Embarrassed by Orange, which refers more to me than him. Embarrassed by Orange. Without irony, he wears the papal crown from Burger King, allows me that crinkled pleasure. Still laughs as dogs and cats in old cartoons spin syrup wise around a tree. About Orange, he is unabashed, though it unseats me, oh clown color, secondary, always the bridesmaid to purple or red, the wild peach, screaming or juiced, color of cheese whiz and chips, the ball dribbled low. And in our garden, that siren he and I planted, deciduous azalea, it's just opening up now. So cheap and tall and tangerine, it's dizzying. For 2 short weeks in May, she blares out there, outbrights the daylilies, the Siberian irises. And I'm just going to finish, thanks so much. I'm going to finish with, so many of these poems were written, or experienced in this village, right here in town. And so I think, well, those of you from South Orange will maybe recognize the community swimming pool where I swim during the summers almost every evening. So this is called Evening Swim. Sometimes after I feel like I've drunk something, not the mouthful of chemical water I swallow on the flip turn, but an elixir that makes my limbs longer, makes my lungs a city, lights on all night in my rented body. I slip in as the sun calms down, as the deer emerge to nibble a hosta. I can wait like a chimp for a lane. I can read till there's almost no one. A coach I once knew told his swimmers, leave it all in the pool. He meant save nothing for later, burn it down. It's Sunday in my small town, and my smooth strokes go mostly unnoticed. Sometimes I stop to drink like a beautiful animal whose eyes see a distant place. I can't. I leave it all there. Thank you so much.
This is a little different. Kind of like, so I don't know if I should sit down or stand up. I'm Jung. I am so grateful to be here. It's a very intimate setting. So the manuscript class that Theresa mentioned, that was 10 years ago, and yes, it was 10 years ago, and I still don't have a poetry book, so we don't know yet if that's going to happen, but in the meantime, I like to say I started to write more in sentences. One day I just wrote instead of a verse, a line, I wrote a whole sentence, and it felt so good. So I just started doing that a little more, and lately I've been writing in prose. But in the interest of sharing today, I haven't written a poem in a long time, and then during the pandemic, like one day I wrote a poem, and it felt so good. Just something about, the immediacy of power of poetry. So I set it down, and then I was looking for poems to read for today, and I didn't have enough poems to read. So I just wanted to, I thought I'd just start off by reading that poem. It's unfinished, but it's a poem. And then I will read the beginning of Prose piece, that Prose book that I've been working on, which is a memoir and essays. So the poem that I'm going to read, it's sort of, Yes, I was thinking about this idea and this word, comfort. Sort of like the more sort of obvious things we think about when we say that word, but also sort of other less obvious things that my mind associates with that word. So sometimes like somewhat brutal things, like comfort women. So it's just sort of, I was trying to write like an Arabic form, kind of fancy form called Guzzle. It didn't quite work out that way, so I'm calling it a near Guzzle. So, a near Guzzle for the ones without comfort. Come to my fort, he said, because man shall not live by bread alone, but by comfort, by every means necessary, even in combat, he said. Raise your hand if you know about comfort. Could it be about ritual? Every day, a week, a month, a season, a pandemic, every cell in body turned over. In its place, a memory of turning over, a ghost. My daughter, she's grown inches in mere months, comfortably. Tell me about your days, I want to ask the woman. Hers, not his version. Break it down, a come, a fort. How does one become the other? I listen, and I become the woman. The interviewer becomes the interviewee. Tell me about your come what may trial, or the trial that wasn't. Want to say? You hurt your back crossing the mountain paths, you said. Was it some seas? Tell me more. Tell me about your crossing, a little fort you built to stay alive. You waited for the tiny soul you recognized inside and into that mountain fort. It could be treacherous, you know. Only I know. Only now I know. Prepare yourself, he said. Take comfort in knowing you could do that. Once, when I was a young girl, I played a peeping Tom, watched my mother smothered against pillow. Was it a man? I wasn't sure if she was uncomfortable or comfortable or mock comfortable. Only my own comfort was disturbed in seeing her smothered. Did I mention already how much my girl has grown, growing into her comfortable self, whatever come what else ghost she was or will become? What is it like to become a fort? Raise your hand tall. Tell us. Okay. Is this supposed to be about comfort? It isn't. Not in the least bit. I haven't read a poem in years, so that felt strange. So I am working on a memoir in essays, as it's calling it. So this is one essay. I chose this one because I felt like it sort of is having a conversation about poem. It's about lots of things, but it's called Holes, I guess I was thinking about, again, sort of the idea of, it began with a literal experience of falling into an outhouse, a type of hole. But sometimes we do more than just tell started to sort of meditate on what other types of holes and sort of transgressive spaces and things as spaces that we occupy. So it begins with an epigraph by Theresa Chae. She is she died young, but she wrote one really definitive hybrid, very experimental book of poetry called Dictée. It says, "Everyone who has seen sees farther." Theresa Chae. Holes. I remember neither being terrified nor anticipating the hole the night I fell into it. Light had gone out inside the stuffy 4x4 shed that was the outhouse, where heat rose from weeks-old putrefaction, an underworld full of as-yet unknown knowledge to my 5-year-old self. The room filled with fey air that took up my lungs each time I entered it. Carved into the center was a rectangular hole, a portal to another world. About that. Alarms. I squatted down like a sumo wrestler over its frame that was bigger than my torso and held myself until I no longer could. One develops a peculiar memory, an inherited kind, in order to command the mystery of the whole. I've been thinking about out-of-body experiences again. The kind where you're there in the same room with another version of you. One of you is in the scene, as it were, doing all the doing, while the other you, the one outside the body, is watching the first you without being able to touch or talk to her. They're separated somehow. Only one, the seer, is aware of the presence and existence of the other, the seen. This makes for an unequal power relationship. The first time this happened, I was a small child, almost mute and sullen-faced, living with my grandmother and several of her unmarried children, 2 aunts and an uncle, in my grandmother's house on the outskirts of Seoul. Hers was a traditional Korean home, a remnant of pre-war colonial architecture, outfitted with a bunker-like kitchen, its concrete poured floor set low and dug a few inches into the ground, like a secret hideout designed to save you in case of a nuclear disaster. The dimly lit kitchen came with a wooden stove, also set low to the ground and with some other Spartan furnishings. In the corner was a small hole framed into the wall, just large enough to fit a tray through it, a way to transport food from the kitchen to its adjoining bedroom. Next to the kitchen, a row of bedrooms with rice paper-fitted sliding doors lined the side of the house with several stone steps leading up to them. My grandmother taught me to always line up my shoes on those steps, the left and the right pair, so the two could be together, lest we die one day unexpectedly. Out back near the chrysanthemums was an outhouse. I love this house. The quiet, austere mood that hung thickly in the evening air. Its afterglow lingering around the house's perimeter. I loved the rectangular flower garden that sat in the middle of the courtyard, around which the neighbors' kids and I ran in circles to play catch, where women gathered to make kimchi each autumn that they then buried into the ground to make it last through the winters. I loved its earthiness, its low to the ground humbleness, its loneliness, spoke sparingly and simply what little she said, dense with meaning. But the outhouse, I didn't love the outhouse. The hole was much too big for my 5-year-old Bill, an obvious fact. No one seemed to mind except I. My legs would strain to hover and hold steady over the dark abyss below, often seizing in place from exhaustion. It was a testy ritual each time, save for my favorite part. At the end of each month, a giant monster truck would come around to swallow all the muck inside the hole, leaving its insides hollow and hungry again to receive more of what we had to feed it. It was a monthly opportunity for renewal, or rebirth. It had gone otherworldly dark inside the cramped shed the night I woke up to go face it. To maneuver my body, set my feet down, the left and the right pair, at the precise footprints along the edges of the rectangle, then hold my breath, hold steady for what would feel like a lifetime, longer than I was able, must have been near impossible, painful. There was a pause. Then I saw her fall, the other me. I stayed behind the seer, by the seer. I don't know how it came to be that I was in my body one moment, and then I was out of my body the next moment. That is a hole in my memory. I have recalled this incident more than a few times in my life. This is the point in the story where people ask the what, where, when, who, why, how questions. What happened next? What happened exactly? How did you fall? How far did you fall? What did you see? Are you sure this happened? I don't quite follow you. I do not know the answers to the Q&A. The answers aren't what matter. I do know I was without fear, say as I might have been about spiders. When one is out of the body, fear, that touchstone of human emotions, sublimates and is no longer an emotion. I know this now. Death, as I come to know it some years later, is also not an emotion, not yet. What happened next, I know as much as my body knows. The memory, the senses attached to that memory, is lodged in the body. When triggered, I feel the thing, the pull, the pop, the grip, by a hand that tugged on my shirt and lifted me out of the hole in my body. Even now. It was quick, it was decisive. Just as swiftly as I was out of my body, this thing was out. It is good to die completely. It's the Shaman Way. Before there was South Korea and North Korea, there was Buddha, a female priestess who officiates Buddha, an ancient Korean shamanic ritual of calling the dead. She has in turn been called to her vocation by the gods and by a matrilineal heritage of all the Buddhas before her. During Buddha, still practiced to this day, the Buddha performs an elaborate rite of spirit exchange, accompanying loud chants, prayers, ecstatic dances, while drums, gongs, and other percussion instruments encircling her play along. It is a family affair. From all over the mountainside village, a throng gathers in the courtyard of the host family and surrounds the Buddha while chanting along, and watches nervously as she walks along the blade of the sword and dances into a trance. She does this to summon the dead, the ancestors of the host family. They may ask for guidance from the dead, about an illness or death in the family, or for prosperity to reign over the village, or for other matters affecting the community. In this spirit exchange, Mudang acts not merely as a medium between this life and others that came before it, but rather as a container in which she is displaced by the evoked spirit. During the trance, the dead possesses her body, mind, and personality temporarily in order to transmit messages to the living. In death, as in life, a closure bodes well for the heart. In the Chunokikun, a type of good performed 3 months after the death of a family member, the soul of a departed, soon to be an ancestor, is released in a final send-off, a farewell party, if you will. This is so they may transition completely to the other side, over that treacherous bridge between here and there, in peace, lest there be harm, deep regret, or unfinished business carried over from this life. Thank you so much.
Want to thank Keisha, Theresa, Jung, and everyone for coming. It's really, and this is my first time reading live, in person from my book. So I'm really honored to be here. Thank you. My book has the topic matter is kind of heavy, so there's a lot of loss, and I don't tend to read those poems in a library, I don't know, I tend to go to some of the lighter ones for an audience, for a general audience. So those of you that have heard these before, I apologize. So I'm going to start with a poem to my husband, who's been very supportive and one of my 2 main fans. It's called When My Husband Says Something About Desire, and the title leads right into the poem. Oh, and you know what? I wanted to turn on, okay, I guess I'll look at that, sorry. When my husband says something about desire, I think about the moon and the body as if it were pure ocean, full of driving energy, its tides rising and rising before they collapse into spume. I think about the way the full moon's glow spurs passion and lust, even in animals, a frenzy of mass spawning, coral too many to count, all spewing their seed into the Great Barrier Reef on the very same luminescent night. Or the eagle owl revealing its secret white neck feathers as it calls out for its mate. What's more, the moon's name. In Spanish, luna, so seductive. The tongue touches the mouth's roof before the lips protrude to form the ooh sound, inviting another's lips in. Which brings to mind my love and how he thrums his tongue when he rolls his Spanish R's. Amor, have you noticed the moon so bright tonight, and how luna ends in This next one is called Pears, and I wrote it, we spent about a year in Barcelona, and so I wrote it there. Pears. At the fruiteria, I speak Spanish. ask something simple like the price of pears. "¿Cuáles, señora, las peras conferencias o las blanquillas?" The shopkeeper replies rapid fire. Since I'm not fluent in the language of getting things done and don't know Spain's pear varieties, I say gracias and go to the bananas I don't want. A moment later, a small boy in untied sneakers asks the shopkeeper a question. By himself, he weighs 3 green pears, prints the price label and sticks it onto the paper bag. I imagine he'll wait for days until his mother picks a ripened pear from the bowl on the windowsill, takes a paring knife, the one with the brown handle worn to the shape of her fingers, and cuts it into chunks. He'll grab piece after piece, his fingers squashing them into his mouth, sweet pear juice running down his chin. On my kitchen counter, the bananas will blacken. We used to live in Atlanta, and my husband is Peruvian of Chinese descent, and our firstborn, our daughter, has really light skin, and she's really white passing. She looks, nobody would necessarily think she was adopted or wasn't mine. But when she got older and went to preschool, and I'd be out with the second one, my baby, a million years ago, my baby, Trace, he has a darker complexion, and 2 days in a row, people actually asked me where I got him. So this is my imaginary conversation with that person. The title is called "A Woman in the A&P Asks Me Where I Got My Baby." He was dropped off aisle 9, International Foods, eye level on a shelf between Goya and La Choy. How funny, but really? Somewhere murky and lightless, the bottom of the Pacific, the Mariana Trench, prehistoric hinge-jawed fish idling blindly by. He couldn't breathe, his lungs suspended in his tiny chest, waiting for oxygen to ignite them. Rolls her eyes. I thought maybe you'd been on a waiting list. No, wait. I found him at the laundromat, naked on top of towels, towels still dry or hot. So hot they hatched him because he was an egg, a cracked egg, and they were 100% Pima, stacked to where absence turns blue. You know what I mean. Fine. The truth is he straddled the red band of my aurora borealis, the reddest band above the neon greens. He surfed the wind, rode vaporous waves. A trail of sepia clouds flowed behind him. The next poem is called Indian Creek with Neighbor Boy, and it's actually dedicated to the boy next door, who was my best friend growing up. And it's it's actually my first poem to be published in a print journal. So, which was Philadelphia Stories, and I'm from Philadelphia. So, Indian Creek with Neighbor Boy. When we were kids, we explored the creek, meandered with it through our yards and beyond, as if we had discovered it ourselves. We wandered along its bed, navigating its contours until we learned where the water moved fastest, where it trickled, where its stones jutted out, forming steps for us to cross from one side to the other. When we knew the creek perfectly, we rolled our pants, tossed our dirty socks and damp sneakers, and waded through it, lifting rocks to catch crayfish and scooping up salamanders shrouded in the cool mud. In winters, we stomped along its gray frozen surface like giants, cracking the ice with our heavy steps, or slid clumsily on the thicker patches behind the McCabe's house. Once, you shattered it and fell in. When you got up, dripping wet, tears streaming down your chubby child cheeks, you turned to me as if it were maybe my fault. A true friend wouldn't just stand there. To ease your pain, I lay in a frigid creek, in the exact spot you had fallen. Is that clock moving?
No.
It's not.
It is moving, but it's
So
moving
I'm going
wrong.
to finish with a poem that's not in the book. It was published in Cortland Review. So it's called At Capitol Reef National Park in Utah. My sister, who is a plein air painter, a really accomplished, pretty well-known one. She and I took a trip through Utah, and she was painting every day, and I was trying to write. So none of the poems actually really came out while I was there, but this is from after. So, at Capitol Reef National Park, Utah. How small I am and lacking, ill-adapted, unlike the tree roots pushing their way through the massive rock walls, twisting and arching, or the tumbleweed cohabitating with the wind. It somersaults and spins across the wash, offers no resistance, while the wild sage waves as if this is what it too is supposed to do. The ease in which they exist and never cause injury. Maybe you, reader, know what I mean. Being honest, the inadvertent offense. I might have hurt someone I love. I've been too judgmental, too rash. Am I the wife my husband desires, the one he thought I'd be? Have I been a good mother? I wasn't an easy daughter. I want to be generous of heart, accept others exactly as they are. How does one do it better? Look at the cactus, low and solitary and covered with thorns. And over there, the asters perched high on frail stems, rising from tangles of grassy leaves, unfazed by the pebbly soil and searing sun, surviving on almost nothing. Should I be thistle, root, or stem? Or like the mountain peaks in the distance, all that verticality? Or maybe like the valley here before me, unassuming and so exposed. Thank you. Yeah.
Should we have an open mic?
Yeah.
Come and read a poem.
She might have had to run up and check out some books or something.
Yeah, I think, she said her one other staff person called in sick today. That's part of why.
She said she was going to do a Q&A, right?
I heard,
Yeah,
yeah.
she did mention that, but I sort of.
Oh, yes, please.
See if she's upstairs, please.
He's okay. his own size.
He's still growing into his class.
Do you have books to sell? Maybe we can buy some books now?
Yeah, let's start setting that up. Sure. This is you? Yeah.
I was sitting here spinning on
You know
it.
what?
Let me get that thing here.
I know how to handle myself.
We do learn to do that, don't we?
We adjust.
So this is where.
So a proper thank you. Sorry, I had to go to the reference desk. Thank you to our poets for joining us this evening for this lovely, lovely evening of poetry and prose. Thank you so much. And we have a copy of Design as well as the curator's notes available here at the library, but they will stay behind to do a author signing. If you'd like to purchase any copies of their book, you're more than welcome to do that. They'll be behind to sign a few copies. And yes, thank you to everybody for joining us this evening. Be sure to stay tuned to the library for other upcoming events that we have by visiting the library's website at www.sopl.org. And we will finish out Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month with an all-ages story time this Saturday at 2 p.m. featuring Man Huang, who is a Chinese-American artist and local artist, and she'll be joining us this Saturday. So
This is this Saturday?
this Saturday is the
21st?
21st, yes. So if you have other friends with younger kids, you can pass that along, and we'll be doing that this Saturday. So really, thank you so much, Theresa. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Jung. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And hope you all enjoy the rest of the evening.